There are moments in a nation's life when history seems to pause, when the road ahead splits into two, and every step taken thereafter reshapes not just policy but identity. The United States has stood at such crossroads before. In 1861, as the Civil War erupted, America was forced to confront questions far deeper than the territory or power. It was about who they were, how they would live, and what kind of a nation would emerge from the turmoil. That moment didn't just redraw borders, it reset the cultural and the social compass of an entire people. Today, the United States may once again be standing at a similar inflection point. Not with muskets and battlefields, but with tariffs, trade routes, alliances, and raw geopolitical power. The philosophy that has guided the American dominance since the end of World War II is being stress tested like never before. A few weeks ago, we at the Global Headwinds raised a simple but unsettling question. Is the US foreign policy retreating or is it reasserting itself? In the days since, events have unfolded that shake the very foundations of the world order the US and its Western alliance painstakingly constructed. Whether the shifts are good or bad for America or for the world is not for us to judge. But one thing is certain, the past few weeks have been highly consequential. Let's begin with trade, the weapon of choice in President Donald Trump's playbook. Tariffs, deployed aggressively and repeatedly, were meant to bend nations to Washington's will. Instead, they may be doing the opposite. Across the world, countries are quietly and sometimes not so quietly redrawing trade maps to reduce their dependence on the US market. Take Canada. Once the America's most dependable economic partner, Canada found itself under relentless pressure, so much so that the rhetoric even drifted into suggestions of becoming the 51st US state. Today, Canada is scrambling to diversify, actively courting markets in China, India, and Europe. This is no small shift, considering that nearly 75% of the Canadian exports still flow into the United States. Europe is making similar moves. The European Union has finalized a landmark free trade agreement with India, described by Ursula von der Leyen as the mother of all deals. This is significant because the US remains the European Union's single largest export destination, accounting for over 20% of its exports. Yet even here, Washington is attempting to link trade with geopolitics, using tariff threats while floating ideas like taking control of Greenland. Even Britain, America's closest ally, appears to be hedging its bets. Quietly resetting trade ties with China, the UK seems unwilling to place all its economic chips on Washington anymore. The pattern is unmistakable. Developed nations and middle powers alike are tweaking decades-old trade routes, routes that once revolved around the United States, now increasingly designed to bypass it. And this global shift is not without domestic consequences. Inside the United States, studies are beginning to show what economists had long warned. Tariffs are inflationary. As import costs rise, businesses pass those costs on to consumers. Consider steel. As of June 2025, the US imported nearly 27 million metric tons of steel, accounting for roughly 23% of the total domestic consumption. Higher steel prices ripple through the economy, making everything from cars to infrastructure more expensive. The burden ultimately lands on the American consumer. Inflation rises. To counter this, President Trump has pushed the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates, an old and familiar tool in central banking. But interest rates are a double-edged sword. Cut them too deeply, and the capital begins to flee to the countries offering better returns. With fewer funds available, banks lend less. Fewer loans mean fewer projects. Fewer projects mean fewer jobs, and fewer jobs mean weaker purchasing power. This is how the economic momentum stalls. The danger? Deflation, a ghost the US knows all too well from the collapse of Lehman Brothers. And then there is the dollar issue. The dollar, being a fiat currency, has only the American goodwill to back it. If due to unpopular foreign policy, the decades-old American goodwill erodes, it is quite natural for the dollar to feel the pressure. That is the economic story. The geopolitical one may be more volatile. US aggression towards Venezuela was one thing. Escalation with Iran is quite another. Iran is not Venezuela, militarily, strategically, or geopolitically. The risks to US personnel are exponentially higher, and both the China and Russia have every incentive to ensure that any US-engineered regime change is anything but smooth. Then there is Greenland. What may seem like a logical strategic acquisition to the MAGA base could prove catastrophic diplomatically. Pushing too hard may permanently alienate Canada and European Union, the very allies the US would need in any major global confrontation. So the question becomes unavoidable. Can the United States still count on its allies? President Trump told the Davos Forum that force would not be used, but trust once shaken is not easily restored. Europe, wary and unconvinced, has already begun prepare for military contingencies. So is the US retreating or reasserting power? The answer is complex. The United States is undeniably reasserting itself forcefully where its immediate interests are concerned. But the methods being employed are triggering realignments few could have imagined even months ago. Old alliances are fraying, new partnerships are forming, and the world order that once seemed immovable is quietly shifting beneath our feet. For strategic think tanks like the globalheadwinds.com, these are not just uncertain times, they are fascinating times. History once again is on the move.